The series begins with a woman frantically running through the streets, cradling her baby as she pleads with another woman for milk. While on the street, a man named Thomas Shelby, the main character and leader of the notorious Peaky Blinders gang. As he rides into the city on horseback, people scatter, intimidated by his reputation. The woman is a fortune teller, performing a magic spell by blowing red powder on Tommy's horse, Monaghan Boy, which is set to participate in an upcoming race. As Tommy reaches his home, it's clear that the people in the city both respect and fear him. He is greeted by his younger brother Finn, and behind the house, his illegal horse racing betting business, Empire, is in full operation, with workers seen working hard to keep it running. The story continues with the introduction of Tommy's older brother, Arthur Shelby. Arthur is not happy with his decision to use the red powder from the Chinese fortune teller, as he believes it's a form of cheating. Arthur is also worried about Billy Kimber, another criminal boss who owns a horse racing betting business on an old steam train. As the story unfolds, we are introduced to Inspector Chester Campbell, a police officer investigating a weapons robbery case. The prime suspects in the case are Arthur and Tommy Shelby. Inspector Campbell, known as a formidable enemy of the Peaky Blinders. At a pub, a man named Freddie approaches Tommy while smoking. He notices that Tommy is wearing a hat with a razor sewn into it, which is a signature of the Peaky Blinders. However, Freddie is disappointed with Tommy when he finds out he's on the Belfast police's wanted list for a robbery case, despite being an ordinary communist who is not involved with the Peaky Blinders. Tommy and Freddie have a shared history as war veterans. Freddie once saved Tommy's life during the war. In response to Freddie's disappointment, he answers casually without seeming to arguing him. Suddenly, a man named Danny, their former comrade in the war, appears and starts to make chaos in the pub. He has struggled with post-traumatic stress disorder since the war and often experiences hallucinations. Freddie and Tommy start to calming him down and ask him to leave home, while Tommy asks the pub owner to bring the bill to the Peaky Blinders. The scene shifts to a woman named Polly pointing a gun at a man. She slaps the man, who turns out to be John Shelby, for carelessly leaving his gun, where his younger sister Ada could have accidentally been shot by their youngest brother Finn. Polly, the mother figure in the Shelby family, is seen scolding John for his carelessness. There are 6 members in the Shelby family. The first son is Arthur, followed by Tommy, and the third is John. Ada is the younger sister, and Finn is the youngest, while Polly is the family advisor. The story takes a dramatic turn as Arthur becomes furious when he learns that a police officer is after them. The city police force has begun recruiting Irish citizens to join their ranks to combat the rising threat of gang activity and communism. However, Polly soon discovers that Tommy is hiding something from her. In a tense meeting at the local church, Polly demands the truth from Tommy. He confesses that his crew had been tasked with stealing motorcycles, but they ended up stealing the wrong crates due to their drunkenness. Inside, they found a staggering arsenal of weapons, all loaded and ready to use. These weapons were intended to be shipped off to Libya. To Polly's surprise and disappointment, she learns that the weapons were manufactured by the Birmingham Small Arms Company, or BSA. This revelation explains why the police have been coming to their city and targeting Tommy with his associates. She urges Tommy to leave the weapons in a place where the police can easily find them, but he insists on moving them 3 days after the full moon. At the same time, Ada was seen together with Freddie, who turns out to be her boyfriend. The next day, a woman comes into the pub where Tommy frequents, asking for a job as a waitress, but the owner, Harry, is hesitant to hire her. The woman introduces herself as Grace. She convinces him of her singing abilities and gets the job. Meanwhile, Inspector Campbell is gathering his men and preparing to take action against the Peaky Blinders. Inspector Campbell is determined to bring down the criminal organization and its corrupt police associates by any means necessary. He enlists the help of Irish recruits in his mission to capture Peaky Blinders members involved in criminal activity. As Arthur Shelby enjoys a night out at the cinema with 2 prostitutes, he is abruptly confronted by Inspector Campbell. He questions him about his involvement in a robbery, but the truth is that he knows nothing about it, as it was his brother, Tommy, who was involved. Inspector Campbell threatens Arthur that if he doesn't cooperate with the police, his family members will be in danger. At the bar, Grace is working hard serving the customers when Tommy walks in and approaches the counter to purchase some rum. It's their first meeting, and Tommy is curious about her and asks her if she is a prostitute, as she seems out of place. Grace remains silent, leaving him to wonder who she is. Meanwhile, Arthur at home injured and receiving treatment for his wound. His family is shocked by the arrival of Chief Inspector Campbell, who is investigating the BSA armed robbery. The next day, Danny is seen struggling with hallucinations and accidentally kills a man in front of a store. While on a station, the Secretary of State, Winston Churchill, summons Inspector Campbell to discuss about the case of the stolen weapons and the importance of keeping them out of the press. That night, Tommy decides to assign Uncle Charlie the task of transporting the weapons by boat. The initial plan was for the weapons to be sent across the border until they were discovered by train officers the next morning, effectively solving their problem. However, Tommy has other plans in mind. He decides to hide the weapons in a warehouse on the old dock where he kept their cigarette there. At a museum, Inspector Campbell meets with Grace, who reveals that she is an informant for him. He is shocked to learn that the leader of the Peaky Blinders is not Arthur, but Tommy. She slow believes that the IRA is responsible for the robbery since the communist can't do that kind of scale. The IRA, or Irish Republican Army, was a military organization that opposed Britain at the time. Inspector Campbell told her not to be distracted from her decision-making, because her father was killed by the IRA when on duties as a cop. Tommy takes Danny to a canal because he was killed a man who turns out to be an Italian, and he is asked to kill him to prevent a war breaking out between them. Danny resigns to his fate, calls Tommy Sergeant Major, and asks him to take care of his wife and sons. Tommy then shoots him, after saying he's a good man. At the betting shop, Tommy is visited by his brother, Arthur, who informs him that his horse has won. Tommy reveals that he plans to make the horse win 3 times and create a betting frenzy before making the horse lose. At the underground canal, Danny is revealed not dead. Tommy has tricked the Italians into thinking he has killed him, and it turns out Danny is sent to London because Tommy has a job for him as a new member of the Peaky Blinders. At their house, Tommy informs Polly that he has surrendered the weapons, and as he passes by the bar, he meets Grace. They share a moment of eye contact. The scene then shows Tommy driving his car with his older brother and younger siblings to attend a fair in the Gypsy area. Along the way, they make a stop to buy a horse from Tommy's former military friend, Johnny, who is with the Lee family. However, during the transaction, the Lee family insults Tommy's mother, calling her a whore, which enraged them. Meanwhile, Inspector Campbell continues his search for the weapons in the small Hale area, visiting every house and rounding up residents. It turns out that Ada's boyfriend, Freddie, lives in the area and is there when the police come knocking. Afraid of being arrested, Freddie flees the city, while Ada hides in one of his acquaintances' house. Inspector Campbell meets with Polly at the church and demands that she hand over the weapons they are searching for, but instead, Polly kisses him. Upon returning from the fair, Tommy finds that the police have ransacked his territory. Polly informs him that they have targeted pubs that pay money to the Peaky Blinders, but left the garrison untouched. The police intend to make it appear that the Peaky Blinders are involved in the robbery to restore public trust in the group. In response, Tommy orders his men to take all the photos of the King of England from their houses and burn them in the middle of the street. He invites a journalist from the Birmingham press to write about this and publish the story, claiming that the police from Belfast have broken into their houses and harassed the women there. In his office, Inspector Campbell receives a late-night call from the Secretary of State, Winston Churchill. The minister is informed about the burning of the King's photo in Birmingham and wants to avoid any involvement or insult to the King. However, he warns Inspector Campbell not to arrest anyone as it will lead to a trial, and the press will find out about the stolen weapons. Inspector Campbell understands that Thomas Shelby is a war hero and has planned all this while reading the newspaper. At home, Polly notices that Ada looks different and discovers she is pregnant. She takes her to a clinic for an examination. After discovers that she is pregnant, Ada is afraid that her family will harm the man who impregnated her. Meanwhile, Tommy is inspecting the horse he got from the Lee family, and Uncle Charlie warns him that if the Lee family sends a bullet with his name on it, they have declared war on the Peaky Blinders. After Tommy rides the horse around the city, he notices it has a leg problem. Grace, who is Inspector Campbell's informant, accidentally spills water in front of him in an attempt to gain his attention. Grace tells Tommy that she wants to ask him to let her sing once every week at the bar where she works. Tommy realizes that she is not an ordinary woman, and he invites her to come to the horse race. Back at the betting shop, they are counting the money from the horse race. Many people bet on Monaghan Boy, thanks to Tommy's strategy. Polly informs him about his sister's pregnancy, and Tommy rushes over to the cinema to find out who impregnated her. Ada initially refuses to tell him, but Tommy insists on the truth. He is surprised that Freddie impregnated her due to his cutting strategy. The Peaky Blinders make a lot of profit from the citizens who bet on Monaghan Boy in the third race, but Polly is angry with Tommy's strategy as they now have to face Billy Kimber, the man who runs the local races. However, Tommy, driven by ambition, wants to be stronger than Billy Kimber and believes he has a weakness. Tommy's next plan is to negotiate with Inspector Campbell, who wants to hunt him down at a restaurant outside their jurisdiction. He offers Inspector Campbell a deal as they both have their own goals, with Tommy wanting his business to be successful and Inspector Campbell wanting Birmingham to be peaceful. Inspector Campbell accuses Tommy of working with Freddie, a communist figure, but Tommy denies involvement with the communists. He tells Inspector Campbell that if he wants to expand his business, he will work with Billy Kimber and asks the police inspector not to interfere with his pubs and betting business. Tommy reveals that he has stolen weapons and threatens to sell them to the IRA in Belfast if he is arrested, which would ruin Inspector Campbell's career. However, if Inspector Campbell accepts his offer, he will get the weapons, allowing him to be promoted and receive a Medal of Honor. Inspector Campbell is at a loss for words and ultimately agrees to his offer. To counter this, Inspector Campbell meets with Grace and asks her to get closer to Tommy and find the weapons without accepting his offer. She is willing to do whatever it takes, even sleeping with Tommy, to get their needed information. Tommy is plagued by a recurring nightmare but is abruptly awakened by Curly, one of his subordinates. Curly takes him to see a white horse he recently purchased from the Lee family, but the animal is ill and the disease has spread to its heart. Tommy believes the horse is cursed by the Lee family's use of black magic and kills the horse to ease his mind. Feeling troubled, Tommy heads to the bar and asks Grace to join him for a drink. She tries to cheer him up, but requests an extra £3 for a dress she plans to wear at an upcoming horse race. This is the first time Tommy sees her smile and he begins to suspect that she may come from a wealthy background, possibly even having given birth out of wedlock and running away. The following day, Polly and Ada are about to take a train to a doctor for her abortion, but they are surprised by the arrival of Freddie, who has come to propose to her. Ada is overjoyed, but Freddie reveals that it was Tommy who told him about her pregnancy and he wants to stay in the city despite Tommy's orders to take her away. Back at the bar, Tommy is with his brother Arthur when two men armed with weapons enter, led by Billy Kimber. Billy is furious to learn that Tommy cheated in the horse race without his permission and threatens to shoot him. However, Tommy has the plan to defuse the situation. To gain Billy's trust, Tommy throws him a bullet with his name on it and suggests they join forces to take down the Lee family. Billy tests Tommy's loyalty by dropping a coin and telling him to pick it up, which offends Tommy's brothers, but he handles the situation smoothly and picks up the coin. The scene continues with Tommy visiting the Garrison pub and ordering a drink from Grace. Two men arrive, claiming to be from the IRA and looking to buy stolen BS weapons, but Tommy denies having them. At the same time, Freddie is waiting for someone, a woman dressed in a wedding gown. They hold a secret wedding ceremony with only a priest as a witness. Meanwhile, Inspector Campbell learns of the IRA searching for the weapon from Grace. She follows one of the drunken IRA members, but he realizes she's trailing him and threatens her. Grace pulls out a gun and shoots him, then flees the scene. Unfortunately, a resident witnessed the incident. Tommy discovers that Ada and Freddie are married, but he refuses to leave the city. Polly and Tommy deal with the police to force Freddie out of town. After killing the IRA member, Grace returns home, clearly traumatized by the incident. She smokes while looking at the red dress she plans to wear at the horse race. Inspector Campbell receives a report of the death, and the witness says they saw a young woman leading the body away. Inspector Campbell assumes the man was killed by a friend, not by Grace. Meanwhile, Polly gives £200 to Freddie, giving him the option to either go to the United States or face Tommy's wrath. Freddie is hesitant and insists he's not afraid of him. At the museum, Grace meets with Inspector Campbell and expresses his concern for her safety and said that he treats her like a daughter. Grace assures him that she's fine and the mission must continue. At a Chinese shop, Tommy sees a suit specifically ordered by Billy Kimber, and soon after, Billy arrives. He warns him that the Lee family plans to steal the betting money during the horse race. But Billy is interested in Grace and asks Tommy to invite her. Meanwhile, Freddie continues to be stubborn and urges the BSA workers to strike and start a revolution. Tommy surprises Arthur by buying the Garrison pub, previously owned by Harry, and giving it for him. He is overjoyed at the news that Tommy has bought the Garrison pub, as it has always been his dream to own a pub. Sergeant Moss then visits Tommy and requests that him to turn over Freddie due to the strike at BSA and warns that if he doesn't, Ada will be arrested as an accomplice. Tommy and Freddie meet by the river, where Freddie points a gun at his head. He returns the money and tickets that Polly had given him, while Ada worries for their safety as she fears they may harm each other. Freddie returned the money because he has loved Ada for a long time and does not want Tommy to think he used her for his gain. During the confrontation, Tommy disarms Freddie and points his gun at him. He warns Freddie that their marriage won't last long. That night, Tommy was plagued by a nightmare of an experience in the tunnels of France with Freddie and Danny. In the dream, an enemy soldier was about to shoot Tommy, but Freddie saved him, only to be shot himself. The next day, Danny, who was now stationed in London, arrived at the garrison and informed Tommy of rumors that the Peaky Blinders were being blamed for the shooting of IRA members. He was ordered to send someone to negotiate and clear up the misunderstanding. As Tommy was dealing with this issue, Grace approached him and asked about his argument with Freddie. But Tommy refused to discuss it and instead asked about the dress she would wear the next day. The following day, Grace readied herself with great care, determined to look her best, particularly for Tommy. He arrived in a luxury car to pick her up, and they headed to a horse racing event. Meanwhile, Arthur and his men were planning to prevent the Lee family from stealing the betting money at the event. Once they arrived at the race, Tommy and Grace were seen entering a party to catch Billy Kimber's attention. He then asked her for a dance. Arthur and his men successfully recovered the stolen money from the Lee family, and he brought it to Tommy. He returned the money to Billy, but in exchange, the Peaky Blinders would manage the security at the horse race event with a 5% profit. Billy was indifferent and told Tommy to speak with his accountant, as he was busy holding on to Grace. Billy had a condition that he wanted to have Grace for 2 hours, and in return, he would lend one of his partners to Tommy for the same amount of time. Grace felt humiliated, believing that these men saw her as a prostitute, to be used as a bargaining chip. Despite her fear, she could not refuse the deal due to her mission. Billy even bet £10 that he could sleep with Grace within an hour. Tommy took Billy's partner to his car. He was worried about Grace's condition, and it was revealed that Billy's partner was not a prostitute but a hat maker. Though Tommy is a ruthless gangster who justifies any actions, his heart is not in it this time, especially since he has feelings for Grace. Back at his house, Billy attempted to win Grace's affection, going as far as trying to force a kiss on her. Grace tried to grab her gun, but Tommy arrived and told him that she had syphilis, warning him not to get infected. This tactic worked, and they quickly left Billy's house. During the ride home, Grace was upset that Tommy had offered her to Billy, but she realized that he had changed his mind and came to save her. She asked him why he had changed his mind, but Tommy kept his expression cold. He likely began to develop feelings for her and didn't want anything bad happen to her. The scene continues with Ada and Freddie on a boat, returning from their honeymoon, looking happy and excited about the arrival of their baby. However, it is revealed that Freddie gave £200 to someone for the revolution, and that the money came from the Russian embassy. As Tommy is walking, he is approached by Jeremiah, the man he had assigned to follow Freddie. He learns that Freddie is returning to town. When he arrives at the betting shop, he finds someone causing a commotion because they were late to place a bet. A young boy takes advantage of the distraction to sneak in. Tommy and Polly then head to the garrison for a family meeting. As they are discussing, a carriage arrives with several Lee family members. It turns out that they were there to steal money from the Peaky Blinders betting shop. The young boy from earlier opens the door for them, revealing that he is working with the Lee family. When the Shelby family gathers at the garrison, Johnny reveals that he plans to marry Lizzie Stark. Tommy, Arthur, and Polly struggle to contain their laughter, as Lizzie is known to be a prostitute. Tommy asks his brother about the sincerity of his future wife's feelings for him. However, before they can discuss this further, they receive the shocking news of a robbery at the headquarters and that the Lee family is responsible for the theft. They also discover a wire cutter on the table, indicating that the Lee family has left a dangerous threat to the Shelbys. Tommy quickly rushes to his car and finds his brother Finn inside, having entered the vehicle through the front window. He tells Finn to get out of the car, and as he does, a hand grenade is discovered, which was planted by the Lee family specifically for him. Determined to end the feud with the Lee family, Tommy, assisted by Johnny, goes to their headquarters to negotiate. It is revealed that the Lee family is led by a woman. Tommy shows her a bullet with Billy Kimber's name engraved on it, indicating that he could have pitted the Lee family against Billy or made her agree to a truce. He explains that he needs their help to fight Gazy, who has been manipulating horse racing betting. It's also revealed that the Lee family is related to Tommy's mother's side. The Lee family accepts Tommy's offer, and they agree to work together to end their ongoing conflicts. Ada and Freddie are back at their home, and it is revealed that Stanley Chapman, a Russian, is involved in a revolutionary mission and receives £200 from Freddie. Ada shares this information with Polly, who tells Tommy and provides him with Stanley's address. Tommy then informs Inspector Campbell of this information. He convinces him that Stanley poses a greater threat than Freddie, especially since he has the £200 from the Russian government to fund the Communist Party's revolution. He also tells Inspector Campbell that he will be rewarded if he manages to arrest Stanley. Inspector Campbell warns Tommy that Churchill is pressuring him to find the weapons and threatens to kill the entire Peaky Blinders family if Tommy doesn't return them. The next day, Inspector Campbell goes to Stanley's address, provided by Tommy, to arrest him with the £200 as evidence. He orders his men to interrogate Stanley to find out Freddie's location. Freddie meets with Polly at their mother's grave, where Polly, who cares for Ada like her child, urges him to leave town as the police will be hunting them down after finding Stanley and the money. However, Freddie is stubborn, doesn't care about her advice, and is disappointed that Ada has leaked information about his mission. As the story progresses, Inspector Campbell's men torturing Stanley to reveal Freddie's hiding place, ultimately leading to his death. At the Peaky Blinders headquarters, Billy Kimber and his accountant Robert pay a visit. According to Robert's report, the Peaky Blinders have done a great job, thanks partly to their help, and Billy has made a significant profit in the last 8 races. Billy also delivers an important letter to Tommy, which reveals that they now have an official betting license for their achievements. They celebrate this news with great excitement. The scene then shows Grace in action as she attempts to find information about the BSA weapons hiding place. She questions Arthur about the cigarettes, suspecting they might be stolen goods, but he informs her that according to Tommy, the best hiding places for stolen goods are on petrol boats near the junction so they can escape quickly. Grace shares this information with Inspector Campbell, who immediately sends his men to search the suspected warehouses, but they cannot find the weapons. As Grace prepares to leave, she is surprised when Tommy mentions her frequent questioning about their business. She fears that he may have uncovered her true mission. But her worries are put to rest when Tommy takes her to a church and asks her if she's a Catholic. Grace confirms that she is, but Tommy points out that she did not sign the cross when entering the church, leading him to deduce that she is a Protestant. Grace is relieved that her true identity is still safe. Tommy then offers her a job as his accountant, which she accepts. The scene ends with them sharing a kiss. The following day, Tommy invites Lizzie for a private conversation in his car. During the ride, he gives her money as a wedding gift for her upcoming wedding with John. It's revealed that Lizzie had been working as a prostitute for the past 2 years and slept with Tommy after the war. She insists that she truly loves John and said that she has changed. However, Tommy tests her by asking to spend one last night with him for money. Lizzie agrees, which confirms for Tommy that she hasn't changed. He tells her to leave, and Lizzie is furious with him for tricking her. Grace informs Inspector Campbell about her new role in the Peaky Blinders as an accountant and secretary. Inspector Campbell reminds her to be careful. Tommy then talks to Johnny about Lizzie's true nature and tells him he can decide. He then goes to the garrison and gives Grace her contract. She wants to celebrate with champagne, but Tommy tells her to save it for a special day. That night, Tommy asks Grace to deliver a letter to Ada. He is cautious because he senses someone in his room, and it turns out to be Johnny, who is frustrated that he can't marry Lizzie. Tommy tries to cheer him up by mimicking their old grandfather, and John is quite amused. He then tells him to wear his best clothes the next day, as they will be ending their feud with the Lee family. The next day, Tommy, Arthur, and the rest of the Peaky Blinders are prepared with their weapons. Arthur surprisingly asks them to tuck a flower into their coat pocket, leaving Johnny confused and angry. He is further taken aback when he finds out that Tommy has arranged a marriage between himself and a woman from the Lee family to end the ongoing war between the two gangs. Despite his initial reluctance, Johnny agrees and is pleasantly surprised when he sees his new bride is a beautiful woman. The two families celebrate the union with a lot of alcohol, which Ada, who is pregnant, becomes uncontrollably drunk. Suddenly her water breaks and Tommy rushes her to the clinic. As the men continue to drink and smoke, Freddie, who hears that Ada is giving birth, rushes to see her. A baby boy is born safely, but Freddie's happiness is short-lived as the police arrive to arrest him. Holly goes to the bar and scolds Tommy, slapping him for lying. He insists that he knew nothing about it, but she doesn't believe him, as he can't swear on the Bible. The scene shifts to Tommy walking to Daniel Island's grave. Holly is seen walking in the rain with a basket of food, presumably for Ada and her baby. Ada is seen not bothering to eat the food, indicating that she is still angry and disappointed with the Shelby family, particularly Tommy, whom she believes betrayed Freddie. He is now in prison, and the Peaky Blinders' happiness has turned to sadness. Tommy visits Grace, who has recently taken on a new job as an accountant and secretary. Sitting in her office, he draws a black star in her appointment book and tells her that it marks the day he plans to take down Billy Kimber and his men. Even his own family is unaware of this plan. Meanwhile, Arthur and his younger brother Johnny visit a recently opened boxing ring in their territory. The owner, unaware of the Peaky Blinders' power, refuses to pay them fees. Arthur intends to teach him a lesson but is interrupted by the sudden arrival of their father, Arthur Shelby Sr. Back at home, his family welcomed Shelby Sr. with open arms, even though he abandoned them 10 years ago. Tommy, in particular, is cold towards him and tells him to leave. However, Arthur, the eldest son, believes that his father has changed for the better. Later, Arthur visits Grace and takes £5 from her cashier. She questions him about the money that is regularly sent to London under the name Daniel Allen. It is revealed that Daniel Allen, Tommy's old friend from the war, is alive and working for the Peaky Blinders in London under a fake name. Arthur tells Grace to mind her business and gives her a coin to keep her quiet. As the day comes to a close, Grace visits Danny's fake grave, reflecting on the secrets and lies surrounding the Shelby family. Arthur and his brother Finn visit their father at the boxing ring. His father reveals that he has been in America for some time and tells Arthur about his plan to open a hotel and casino there. He tries to persuade him to invest some money in the venture. He is tempted, but his father advises him to talk to Tommy first to avoid conflicts later. However, Arthur is not interested in taking orders and agrees to help his father. To celebrate their plan, Arthur Sr. invites his son to a sparring match in the ring. Meanwhile, back at the garrison, a stranger approaches. His name is Brian, and he is an important figure in the IRA. He explains that Ryan, who was shot in Tommy's territory, was his cousin. As we know, Ryan was shot by Grace when he attempted to take her to the IRA headquarters. Brian is from South Armagh and is an influential figure there. Tommy realizes he is not an ordinary man and invites him to the parlor. Brian wants to buy stolen weapons from him, as Danny has been spreading rumors in London that he has the weapons and ammunition. Tommy denies the allegations and tells Brian that Danny is crazy. However, Bayan doesn't believe him and threatens to kill Tommy and his family if he doesn't get the weapons. Tommy takes the threat seriously, admits to having the weapons, and agrees to sell them to him at the right price. Later, Tommy meets with Inspector Campbell to discuss the situation. Tommy recognizes Bayan from a wanted poster and discovers that he is the brigade commander of the South Army IRA. He proposes a plan to Inspector Campbell to catch Bayan with the stolen weapons as bait, but he wants to clarify that he is not involved. Inspector Campbell agrees to the plan, understanding that he will receive credit for the capture. Tommy also asks him about the person who leaked Freddy's location, but he denies any involvement. Meanwhile, Arthur secretly gives his father a large sum of money to invest in his plan to build a casino in the United States. However, he has not discussed this with Tommy, and they plan to leave for the United States on Friday. Suddenly, Tommy rushes into Grace's office, looking panicked. He asks her to help him because 2 IRA men are coming to meet him. The plan is for Grace to point a gun at them and signal the police to arrest them after they arrive. However, things quickly take a turn for the worse. Bayan and his companion arrive and immediately demand the location of the stolen weapons. After Tommy gives them the address, they reveal their intentions to kill him. As they point their guns at him, Tommy signals for Grace to fire her weapon. She shoots and kills Bayan's companion instantly. Bayan chokes Tommy, but he manages to fight back by hitting Bayan with a spittoon, killing him. The traumatic memories of his time at the war in France come flooding back as he does so. After witnessing the violent altercation, Grace is left shaken and scared. She and Tommy hug each other in the aftermath. The police arrive, but Tommy is angry with them for being late. He escorts Grace home and apologizes to her. The next day, Grace meets Inspector Campbell in the park and tells him about what happened the previous day. She explains that she was the one who killed the IRA member, not Tommy, and that he had saved her. She tells him that their mission has come to an end and that she will be resigning. She asks him to leave Tommy alone after the weapons are found and promise to do the same. It is revealed that the grave of Daniel Allen is where the stolen weapons are hidden. Grace gets this information from Arthur. Later that night, Inspector Campbell digs up the grave and finds the weapons he has been searching for. The next day, Grace visits the grave again and is surprised when Inspector Campbell proposes to her, referring to her as a daughter. Grace tells him that he deserves better and that she has always thought of him as a father. Arthur, waiting for his father's arrival, is disappointed when he doesn't show up. He finds his father preparing to leave at the train station and demands that he give the money back. His father threatens to kill him, and Arthur realizes he can't win, so he walks away. He goes home and meets Polly, who finds out that he gave £500 to his father. Arthur is even more frightened when Polly tells him to tell Tommy about it himself. Tommy visits Daniel Allen's grave and realizes it has been dug up. He tells his younger brother Finn to take care of himself, as he will leave for a while. At the same time, Inspector Campbell gathers his men at the office and informs them that they have found the stolen weapons, and that their mission is to prevent them from being used to harm innocent people. However, the person responsible for the crime is still at large, and they plan to arrest him. Tommy goes to Garrison to say goodbye to Grace, but Inspector Campbell and his men are closing in. Grace decides to take him to her home for safety. They spend the night there. Inspector Campbell arrives at the garrison, threatens Harry with a gun, and demands to know Tommy's location. Harry tells him the truth that Tommy is with Grace. At the boxing ring, Arthur is heavily drunk and feeling frustrated. He tries to hang himself, but the rope is not strong enough to hold his weight. Tommy finds him and sees the rope marks around his neck. He already knows the story of Polly and doesn't blame him. He jokingly suggests that if he wants to kill himself, he should use a gun instead. After that, he shares some good news with Arthur and shows him a business card with the name Shelby Brothers Limited on it. He explains that the company is owned by the three of them, with John being one of the partners. This news brings a smile back to Arthur's face. The next day, a man named Mr. Zhang, a tailor for gangster bosses, getting ready for the day when Inspector Campbell arrives at his shop. Inspector Campbell says other officers recommended the place for other services, leaving the audience wondering why he is there when the shop is closed. Meanwhile, Tommy is seen walking to Arthur's house, where he wakes and tells him to prepare for a mission. He then goes to Charlie's house to prepare the car they will use, and even John, who is busy with his wife in the morning, is told by Tommy to get ready immediately. Tommy then heads to the Peaky Blinders headquarters and Polly is seen praying for their safety. Grace visits the museum where she used to report on the Peaky Blinders to Inspector Campbell, but this time she is greeted by Sergeant Moss. He gives her a letter from Inspector Campbell. In the letter, Inspector Campbell expresses his disappointment in Grace for rejecting him and the betrayal of her principles and standards of honor for her love of a criminal, who is supposed to be her enemy. He also mentions that her father would be disappointed in her. Tommy visits Mr. Zhang's shop to pick up his suit, where he learns from him that Inspector Campbell is there and pays extra for the information. He enters Inspector Campbell's room and points his gun at him. Inspector Campbell, who is unarmed, refuses to fight. Tommy mocks him for claiming to want to clean up the city, yet he is no different from his predecessors. Inspector Campbell tells him that if he turns over the stolen weapons, he will receive a medal from Churchill, but Tommy still doesn't know how they got that information. Inspector Campbell warns him that his heart will be broken by the end of the day, just like his. Tommy reminds him that he still has his family, unlike Inspector Campbell. Polly visits Ada and her baby, revealing that she had 2 children, a 3- and a 5-year-old, who were taken by the church after the police arrested her, and their locations are still unknown. Tommy saves her, but Ada is still mad at him. Then Polly tells her something important regarding Freddie. A policeman comes to Freddie's cell to take him away. Beaten and scared, Freddie pleads with him not to send him to Bridgestone Prison, as he will be killed there. The man replies that he won't make it to Bridgestone Prison. Inspector Campbell's report to the Prime Minister brings him joy, as he has found the stolen BSA weapons and will be honored in the new year. He asks him about the informant involved in this operation, and he says a good word for Grace. As for the Peaky Blinders, Inspector Campbell chooses not to go after them, as he doesn't want the public to know about them. The Peaky Blinders are meeting at their headquarters, discussing their important mission of taking down Billy Kimber today. They have allied with the Lee family, making them powerful enough to take down Billy Kimber and his men at the Worcester racetrack. After his men are killed, Tommy himself will face Billy Kimber. Polly then asks Ada to come in. She is still angry with Tommy, but he wants to talk to her about Freddie. Meanwhile, Freddie was seen inside the police car, escorted by a police officer who removes his handcuffs. He explains that the Peaky Blinders ordered him. Freddie is relieved, as this is Tommy's plan. However, the police car is stopped by a wagon blocking the road. Unexpectedly, Danny is waiting for them. He takes out a stolen weapon and starts firing. This is one of the stolen BSA weapons. Freddie, saved by Danny, is confused about why he is still alive. Back at the garrison, the Peaky Blinders are relaxing before the mission. Tommy talks to Grace, who looks anxious. She reveals that she will leave while Tommy is on his mission. Tommy, who still doesn't know her true identity, tries to convince her to stay. He explains that after this is over, he will establish a real company, and the Peaky Blinders will have one of the largest official race tracks in the country. Tommy wants Grace to be there for him, as he loves her and wants to marry her. Grace is overwhelmed and wants to tell him the whole truth, but is interrupted by Arthur, who informs them that Billy Kimber and his men are headed their way. Tommy returns to his house and tells Ada to hide, suspecting that she may have leaked his mission to Billy Kimber. With the Lee family, who were supposed to help him, now still in Worcester, Tommy knows he will have difficulty taking down Billy Kimber. Polly tells Tommy that love has blinded him and Grace has betrayed him, as he had confided in her about his plans. In shock, Tommy realizes that she may be right. Realizing that her cover has been blown, Grace goes to the empty garrison as everyone has left the city. She wants to leave, but Polly knows her true identity and pulls out a hairpin from behind her hair. Feeling threatened, Grace pulls out her gun and points it at her. Grace reveals that she is a royal agent and won't hesitate to take action. However, Polly is unfazed, and they sit down and talk. Polly and Grace talk about Tommy, the man they both love. Polly reveals to Grace that Tommy used to be a happy and carefree person, but the war has changed him. She also mentions that even though Grace helped Tommy when he was a fugitive, she will never forgive her for her actions. She advises her to leave the city before it's too late. Meanwhile, Tommy is discussing strategy with his men to fend off an impending attack from Billy Kimber's gang. They are outnumbered, but Tommy is hopeful that their experience in the war will give them an advantage. Sergeant Moss, who received information about the attack, informs Inspector Campbell, but is disappointed that he has ordered the police to stay away and let them fight it out. At the garrison, Tommy is waiting for Billy's arrival and reminiscing about his past with Grace and Harry, the pub owner. Harry brings up Grace, but Tommy insists that she is a part of his past and no longer a concern. Just as he is lost in thought, Finn informs them that Billy Kimber has arrived and the war is about to begin. Before the war is about to begin, Tommy and his men are outnumbered and outgunned. Not long after, Danny and Freddie arrive with the machine gun, providing a much-needed boost to the Peaky Blinders' chances. But, just as the war is about to start, Ada arrives with her baby and pleads with both sides to stop the violence, reminding them of the horrors of war. Billy agrees with Ada but then unexpectedly shoots Tommy and Danny. Danny is killed, and in a moment of fury, Tommy shoots Billy in the head. He tells Billy's men to go home, as their leader is dead, and then he turns to Grace, standing nearby. She approaches Inspector Campbell and asks him how he discovered her true identity. He tells her that he had informed Tommy earlier, and she had also broken 2 hearts that day, including her own. Back at the garrison, they are tending to Tommy's wounds and mourning the loss of Danny. As they remove the bullet from Tommy's shoulder, he is howling in pain. They pay their last respects to Danny, who died in the war. Sergeant Moss reports to Inspector Campbell about the outcome of the war between the Peaky Blinders and Billy Kimber's gang, with only one victim, Billy Kimber, and the Peaky Blinders emerging victorious. However, due to Inspector Campbell's orders, there were no officers on the street so that Freddy could escape, and there was no one to witness the Peaky Blinders committing murder, making it impossible to arrest them. Inspector Campbell then informs Minister Churchill of his decision. Back at the garrison, the Peaky Blinders are celebrating their victory. Tommy visits Grace in her flat and reveals that he knows her true identity as a police officer. He tells her that their relationship must end because they have different principles, and he cannot relinquish his identity as a criminal gang leader. Grace gives him an address in London, where she will be for a week, and tells him that she has plans for their future. Tommy returns to the garrison and tells Polly about the special champagne Grace bought for them. He reveals that Shelby Brothers Limited has become the country's third largest legal racetrack operation. Polly can tell that Tommy is heartbroken inside. Tommy writes a letter to Grace, expressing that he has learned to hate his enemies, but for the first time, he loves his enemy. He regrets that he cannot accept her idea to go to New York, as he has responsibilities to his family and the people he needs to protect. He tells her that before the war, he used to flip a coin to make decisions, and he will do it again later. He will inform her of his decision in 3 days. Meanwhile, Grace is waiting for a train at the train station when Inspector Campbell arrives and points a gun at her. Tommy flips his coin, and a gunshot is heard. The scene ends with the outcome of the gunshot unclear.